The Bogeyman for Adults. Roger ran down the corridor and burst through the doors into the office. The 24 employees, hearing the clatter, looked up from their desks and saw his panicked expression. "Quick," he yelled. "We need to get out. The building's on fire." Pulses quickened. Everyone jumped to their feet and made a beeline for the emergency exit. Once on the street, they gazed back into the building, looking for the first signs of smoke and flames. They waited and waited. Nothing happened. Eventually, Roger walked towards the building, pushed open the door, and looked back over his shoulder with a mischievous grin. Suckers! Roger had manufactured a believable threat and made the others invest in that belief. Once implanted, the belief manipulated their emotions, fear, which then controlled their behaviour. Run! Of course, the scam was over after they had been standing outdoors for a few minutes, but for the duration of the experiment, Roger got his colleagues to do what he wanted them to do. He essentially mind-controlled them. It's especially important to note that they would have felt completely in charge of their own actions during the whole episode. This is the genius of mind control: to influence a person's behaviour while the intended victim unwittingly believes he's completely in control. Now, imagine Roger had changed one variable in his experiment. Let's say the words he used were, "Quick, we need to get out. There's a werewolf down the corridor and boy is he pissed." It wouldn't have had quite the same effect, would it? For a threat to be effective, it must be believable. Not true, not provable, just believable. One of my chief objections to Christianity is its use of the threat of damnation. The fear of hell is a believable threat to a society already steeped in a religious ideology. A warning must have credibility to work effectively, and that's where the zeitgeist comes in. Everybody knows this, so it must be true. It's all well and good to warn someone of a real threat, but how often is the threat of God's judgment presented without any evidence to back it up? Instead, it relies on the zeitgeist. It depends on people being exposed to Christianity en masse, conditioned from birth to think, "It must be true because I've heard it so often and everybody else around here believes it." Imagine if no one had ever heard of Christianity, and an archaeologist today suddenly unearthed the Gospels and told the world, "I've just learned that God holds us all in condemnation, but if we do what these scrolls say, we'll be saved." How much impact do you think that would really have? Sometimes the words are dressed up in a positive fashion, how God in his love sent his Son to die as a sacrifice to save us from his judgment. But the underlying message is always the same. Unless you do what we tell you, you will be damned to hell for all eternity. The good news of the gospel relies on us first knowing about the bad news of God's judgment. The bottom line is this: without evidence, those words don't mean anything. And the onus is really on the salesman to present you with the evidence. It's not the responsibility of those on the receiving end to go looking. I mean, do we really have to investigate the claims of every religion on the planet, just in case one of them might be true and we don't miss our tiny window of opportunity to escape damnation? Christianity presents a message that everybody needs to hear in order to be saved from some terrible fate, but only a portion of the world ever gets to hear it. It's eternity by postcode. If you're not lucky enough to be born in a locale where the one true religion gets a hearing, then it would have been better for you if you were never born. Furthermore, according to Christianity, we're born with something called original sin, a principle within us that ensures we commit sins. Despite never having a choice about whether we wish to be born, we discover that we have no choice but to become sinners, no choice about falling under God's judgment, no choice about being born in a country where we never hear the message of salvation, and no choice about suffering in hell for all eternity. Do you really believe that is a true and credible picture of what lies behind human existence? When these things started to finally become clear to me, after almost 20 years of experience as a Christian, I started to see what the whole game of religion was about: mind control. Religion uses an unsubstantiated threat in order to control your thinking and thus dictate your behaviour. There's no other way to describe what I did when I became a Christian. I no longer had any freedom to think for myself. I could never say, original sin? I'm not sure about that. Maybe there's another reason for all the trouble in the world. The Word of God declared it to be the truth, and so I had to believe it. Original sin and an assortment of other truths then shaped my character and actions. Having the freedom to think your own thoughts means being able to make your own judgment calls on what is possible and impossible, true and untrue, right and wrong, to formulate a belief system that you have worked out with your own mind. Christianity takes that freedom away and says, no need to think for yourself. In fact, it's perilous to do so. But never mind, we've worked it all out for you. Pre-packaged, ready-made truth. I recognize that not all Christians come to believe by being made afraid of hell, and to them what I'm saying may sound offensive. You don't live in fear, I know you don't, because I didn't live in fear for most of my Christian life either. I felt safe and secure under God's protection. But just wait till you experience doubt. It's not a comfortable spot to be in when your mind starts seeing a different picture and you sense your faith ebbing away. When doubt grows to the extent that you think Christianity is probably false and you make the leap into disbelief, it's not pleasant to consider what might happen to your soul if you've unwittingly made a bad decision. A voice in your head cries in panic, "What if I'm wrong?" And another soothing voice says, "Look, it's much more comfortable over here. Don't think, just believe, and you won't have to feel afraid anymore." The fear of God's judgment is Christianity's big magnet, designed to pull you in and hold you in. God becomes the adult version of the Bogeyman, a repackaging of the myth that cruel parents use to keep their children from sneaking out of bed during the night. "I don't know that there's a monster in my closet," muses the child, "but Daddy says there is, and I don't think he would lie, so I had better do as I'm told." Similarly, the adult says to himself, "I don't know that there's a hell, but the church and the Bible say there is, and I don't think they would lie, so I had better do as I'm told." French philosopher Blaise Pascal, 1623 to 1662, crystallized this predicament in what is called Pascal's wager. When the existence of God can neither be proved nor disproved, there is much to be gained from wagering that God exists, everlasting life, and little to be gained from wagering that he does not, annihilation at death. Conversely, one has nothing to lose in believing. The worst case scenario for the believer is annihilation, but everything to lose in disbelieving, where the worst case scenario is eternal punishment. The first problem with Pascal's wager is that it is entirely motivated by the desire for security, not truth. It is the way of the coward who runs for cover at the first sign of danger. This mental attitude is utterly toxic to the pursuit of truth, because one's course is guided not by logic, but by emotional pressures. The next problem is that the wager fails to ask, which God? The God of the Christians or the God of the Muslims? Both Christianity and Islam claim exclusive status as the one true route to God. Both warn of hell and damnation for rejecting the offer of salvation. Both cannot be true. The security that Pascal's wager proposes is an illusion. How one reacts to it depends entirely on which God is the more familiar in individual experience. Thirdly, if one chooses to believe only because he is scared not to, is that even genuine belief? Would an all-seeing God not see the base motive behind the outer appearance of religious faith? Lastly, it is simply not true to say that there is little to be gained from wagering that God does not exist. One's whole outlook on life is determined by his philosophical and religious perspective. Make the wrong choice and you face an earthly existence, which could be your only one, that will be poisoned by falsehood. I refused the easy route. I thought to myself, if the threat of damnation were taken away and I had a simple choice right now of what to believe, would I continue to believe in Christianity? The answer was no. If the only reason I had left to believe was because I was being coerced into it, then that was no good reason at all.